Just don't care, I'm going everywhere. Just don't care, I'm going everywhere. Just don't care, I'm going.
It's hot and humid as fuck here today, and I'm sweating like a paedophile on Club Penguin. So if I look rough as toast, I'm sorry. So we live still in interesting times. It's roughly the second anniversary of Gamergate, and while it's slowed down and the whole movement's kinda over at this point, shit is still going down. Gorka just died. Huge victory. The culture war is broader and more all-encompassing now. I mean, you just have to look again at the Hugos to see that happening. There's a lot going on. Across nerd media still. You know, it's well beyond games, and a lot of the Gamergate veterans are involved in this fight. All over. And still being misrepresented, and so on. What's been really interesting has been, you know, just within the past couple of weeks, we've had 2 sets of chat logs drop, which have proved that anti-Gamergate, total hypocrites. You know, they were actively working to dox people, get them fired, all kinds of horrible shit. You know, all the things they accused other people of, they're guilty of. This isn't a surprise to anyone who was involved in Gamergate, but you would think this revelation would change some perceptions, maybe shift some stuff around, show that maybe Gamergate had a point. I mean, the latest log that dropped was from the Crash Override Network. You know, the anti-harassment people, the ones supposed to help people when they're being bullied and doxed and so on. But there they are, advocating and executing dox drops. You know? I mean, I basically think at this point, Gamergate has been almost entirely vindicated in everything they claimed, everything they said. You know, they were right. No one's ever going to admit this, of course. No one's ever going to give them the credit, though even some former, now, Gorka journalists were admitting that Gamergate was their big problem, their worst enemy, the ones that really, really fucked them up. But still, unsung heroes, but I guess that doesn't matter. It grates on me a bit that Gamergate and the people involved, of course including myself, are still being demonised and misrepresented and treated like shit, when, in my opinion, they should be treated as heroes. You know, Gamergate actively and successfully fought against censorship. Gamergate forced regulation of native advertising. Huge boon to everybody there. They forced companies to adopt or to actually enforce their ethical and disclosure policies. They supported women in technology, women in gaming. They are massively diverse. Much more diverse than their opposition, ironically enough. These should be things that are celebrated. You know, and they have actually proved quite resistant to being co-opted. You know, people have been heavily criticising Milo, who got a lot of credit by being one of the very few people to report accurately on Gamergate in the beginning. That's the only reason anybody really went to Breitbart or listened to that side of things at all, is because they were getting such short shrift in every other media arena you care to mention, that, you know, anyone who gave him a fair shake earned a lot of social credit. But you know, even then, Milo's come in for a lot of criticism from Gamergate people for not fulfilling his promises about providing grants for students and some of the other things that he's said and done. You know, so that was a big concern of mine back in the day, being a horrible lefty, that the right wing would somehow manage to co-opt people, that their main interest was in winning converts to their side of things. And that was definitely a large part of their motivation, but it doesn't seem particularly to have worked. You know, looking back on it now, Gamergate is kind of the opposite of Occupy. Now, Occupy was a very intersectional protest. And people who are fans of intersectionality would have you believe that intersectionality is about building this broad base of common issues and all the rest of it. In practice, what intersectionality becomes in these protests is that it requires absolute agreement on every single issue from everyone involved. So what was a protest about money in politics became a protest about all kinds of other things. And any wackadoodle guy who came along and added his or her agenda, it was expected everyone would agree. That's what killed Occupy. There's plenty of people who would agree that money in politics is a big problem, who would not agree on a bunch of other issues. Whether you consider them valid or not doesn't matter. You killed your broad base. But you look at Gamergate, and it contains people from across the political spectrum, across the gender spectrum, across the racial spectrum, who only agreed on a couple of points. We want an ethical media that tells the truth, and we don't want our games censored. Other than that, anything went. So you had people like me, hardcore left anarchist, working alongside people like, for example, Milo, a right-wing demagogue, whose views I find reprehensible on most points. But we were able to work together because we were focused on those two, singular issues, really. And what they really boil down to is free expression. I believe he should have the right to express his views, as much so that I can counter them and see them and argue against them as anything else. And he believes that people like me should be able to express our views, provided we don't censor anybody else. So it was able to build this huge, broad base, and yet it was attacked for that. Oh, you're associating with these people on the alt-right or wherever who are racist or whatever. Well, okay, he's got a right to be racist. I don't agree with him, but I believe he should be able to express that point of view, and I should be able to argue against it. There's our common ground. Well, like I say, this has become much, much broader. So, you look at the Hugo Awards. Now, my internet has been largely fucked for the past couple of weeks. I've barely been able to work. And on the intermittent slow connection I've got, or on my phone, basically all I've really been able to do is to lay out plans for future work, catch up on TV, and spend a lot of time on social media, arguing with people. And in the wake of the Hugos, I've spent a great deal of that time trying to understand the point of view of the people who are excusing the censorship, excusing the ideological bias, going against the puppies, the kind of people that threw out Truesdale and dig in their heels and insist that there's nothing wrong with what's going on. So I have to preface this again by reminding people that despite my terrible reputation, I am on the far left. I am progressive. I believe in equality for all. I believe representation is good. I just place story and quality over someone's race or gender or whatever else, because I think these things do not and should not matter, that people should be judged as individuals. Somehow this concept has become conflated with everything that's terrible in the world. Now, apparently in complete contradiction to everything I've ever been taught or thought about progressive or leftist thought, now we have to prioritise people's identities over and above them as individuals. I do not understand how this happened. I do not understand how anyone thinks this is a good thing or a step forward. I view it as deeply, horribly regressive, but this is the situation we're in. But yeah, to remind you, I am a left-wing, filthy liberal. And yet I find myself on the side of the puppies. Not because I agree with their ostensible politics, and by no means are they all right-wing nutjobs or anarcho-capitalists. There are plenty of people like me who also sympathise with them, to the extent that we believe that they have a right to express their point of view, and they have a right for their work to be considered outside any political differences that people have with them. I don't see why this is such a radical, horrible concept, and I don't see how, in light of everything that's happened in the Hugos over the past few years and in science fiction fandom and conventions in general, anyone can still say with a straight face that there is not a bias. The actions of the puppies may have been naughty and bad and wrong, but they have made this bias against them explicit and obvious. The bias towards pseudo-literary, pretentious fiction in these arenas has been made obvious. I don't see how you can get away from that. Anyway, I've been trying to talk to people on the opposite side of the puppies in this debate. Editors, writers, I've probably burned a lot of bridges for trying to do so. I'm just trying to drill down and find out where this denial is coming from, that there's a problem, why they're so unwilling to even consider the other person's point of view. Now, I try to be detached and objective a lot of the time, and as a result, I often get accused of being unempathetic. But there's absolutely no effort whatsoever made on the side of the anti-puppies to understand why the puppies and their ilk are upset. There's no effort whatsoever. Instead, they build up this straw man. Oh, they just don't like women and gays writing books, or they don't like the darkies, or whatever it is. This straw man. Whereas that's not what it is. It's that for all the shallow diversity that we hear about, the idea that it's somehow a great thing that because someone is brown and wrote a book, well done, have a participation award, rather than is this book any good, that they're feeling crowded out, that we have not gained diversity, we have lost diversity of the only kind that actually matters, diversity in creativity, diversity in ideas, that has been lost, and that this fixation upon identity devalues people who have minority identities by reducing them to that identity, and crowds out people who are possibly deserving of awards based on their work. I mean, the puppies have gone out of their way occasionally to nominate people whose politics they don't agree with, but whose work they believe is of quality or of a genre or style that they like rather than anything else. And these have still been rejected. That's how explicit and overriding the ideological bias is. But I have gotten absolutely nowhere trying to talk to these people or to explain my point of view. They will always find some way to deflect, to avoid. You'll find, oh, you're just mansplaining, or you're a troll. Whatever else troll might mean, someone who disagrees with me cannot be a useful definition, to paraphrase Dawkins. I am never trolling. I am always trying to have an honest conversation, but it is like trying to pin a greased eel to a wall with a nail gun at a distance of 50 feet to get a straight conversation out of anybody, to get them to admit points or consider the other point of view. My objections stem from my left liberal point of view. That's why I'm upset. That's why I oppose these people, because they are anti-free speech, because they are reducing people to their identity class, to their race, to their gender, to their sexuality, to all these things that don't fucking matter a shit. It's just frustrating, and I've tried to understand their point of view, and I've tried to express that, look, I'm coming at this from the position of someone who agrees with you politically, but disagrees with your methods and your hypocrisy. If you're claiming to be for gender equality, and then you trot out mansplaining the moment a guy happens to disagree with you, you're a fucking hypocrite. Social justice warrior is not a title to be proud of, because the warrior part indicates extremism, unreasonableness, hypocrisy, idiocy, lack of any kind of true activism, It's just frustrating. I don't think there's a way out of this. I think people will just have to build alternatives. I think that's the only way we're going to get any real change here. Science fiction and fantasy is just so toxic now. Maybe I'll just fuck off into erotica, where your kink is not my kink, is somewhat respected. Different ideas, different points of view, different squicks, different kinks. Don't know what a squink is. Maybe that's something you kind of like but grosses you out a bit. Edge case. I don't know. It's just hopeless. The very people who claim to want broad diversity and to include all kinds of different points of view and so on are the very people that don't actually want that when you come down to it. You know, I've listened to Truesdale's panel. He did nothing wrong. Nothing I've seen other moderators... Yeah, nothing I've not seen other moderators do at popular science conventions, gaming conventions, science fiction and fantasy conventions. And yet, they're treating it like it's something outlandish. And I like, from everything I've heard, Truesdale sounds like a bit of a cock. I don't care for his views on gay people, provided they're being reported accurately, or any of the rest of it. But again, he has a right to his point of view, he has a right to express it. He was presenting a counter-thesis to the argument on the panel, that this is a golden age for short fiction. I don't think it's a golden age for any fiction. I think it's a dark age for fiction. It's just mystifying. And nobody is willing to have a straight conversation about it. If someone is, hit me up. Maybe we can do a hangout or something. But I mean, what it comes down to is this. I disagree with at least the rabid puppies on 99% of their political views. The only thing I agree with is their free speech radicalism. That's about it. When I go to talk to the puppies about the issues, I find them to be much more reasonable, much more erudite, much more willing to talk about why they're upset and how, and to offer evidences, however flimsy, that what they're saying is true, that there's a point behind it, that there's a good reason that they're upset. When I try to talk to their opposition, I get accusations, I get the bullshit that's been spread around online at me as an excuse not to talk to me, so poisoning the well. I get evasions, I get moved goalposts, nobody seems willing to offer anything to back up their position, and a lot of what you get is educate yourself shitlord. Whereas on the other side, people are willing to talk and explain, and they're happy to listen to you and to argue the point, and to explain their point of view and why they feel as they do. So, you know, if you're against them, if you believe their point of view is invalid, you're not doing yourself any favours. You're fucking yourself up. So yeah, to return back to the original point, 2 years since Gamergate, the culture war is now bigger and broader and probably more important than it has ever been before. And things just keep happening. I don't see any end in sight to this. In the 90s, you could kind of tell that PC was kind of petering out. But then that was pre-internet for a lot of people. It's different now. Before, the kind of PC overreach and the other previous problems that we'd faced, like Wortham, like Pulling, like Jack Thompson, the accusations of the evangelical right, these were things that came from outside what you might call the nerdosphere and attacked it from the outside, and people closed ranks against it and fought it off successfully. These days, shit is coming from the inside. We're being attacked from the inside by our own people. Well, people overuse the term cancer to describe things they don't like, but in this case I think it's appropriate. Because it's within. It's like your own body turning against itself. So the cancer analogy is much more apt in this instance. You've got people actively arguing against free speech, against fairness, against equality. You've got people who claim to be anti-sexist being sexist. You've got people who are claiming to be anti-racist being racist. You know, you can't even raise this conversation without some fucktard bringing up white male as if it means anything, as if it's not base hypocrisy. I'm rambling and going over myself here. I wanted to get this out here since my internet is finally fixed, and I should be able to upload it without any issue. I'm sorry about the dings. I'm sorry about hitting the thing, and I'm sorry nobody will watch this. But you know, rambles have their place as well. Take care, guys. Look after yourselves. Make your own spaces to make your stories, because everything is fucked. And on that cheery note, goodbye. If you like what I do here, please like, subscribe, You can find me on social media on Twitter at Grimachew, James Desborough on Facebook, James Grim Desborough on G+. My main website is postmortemstudios.wordpress.com. If you want to help me out with a little money, which will go to support my games, writing and other projects, you can do so at Patreon, which is also Grimachew.